Good
Unmute
evening,
yourself.
everybody. Good evening, everyone. My name is Donna, and I am a recovered alcoholic. And it's always an honor to be asked to speak at a meeting. Um, I spoke this morning, and if I didn't rely on God, I would worry about what I'm going to share tonight. And it always happens at what I think I'm going to share. I know how I begin, and I never know what transpires after I begin. And I'm so grateful that I'm not nervous. And there's 199 people on this call. It's a miracle because all my life I was fearful of people. And it's a miracle that I can look people in the eye. And I think that's one of the things I miss about in-person meetings, because the one thing I would love to do is before I started my share, I would just scan the room and connect with the other spirits that were in the room, because that's what we are. We're spiritual beings having human experiences. I also realize that, it's 8/11, and I'm one of hundreds of people that are carrying a message of hope for other people. And I realize how awesome that is to be able to be part of a group of people that get to a place in their lives and they realize that the most important thing is how we can be of use. Whereas before I used to suck the air out of the universe because I was so selfish. My sobriety date is August 5th, 2000. I just turned 21. And it's interesting because I turned 65 as well as turning 21. So this has been a very monumental year. For those of you that understand, like getting that Medicaid card, yo. So August 5th, 2000, what happened that day? I did not stop drinking. My problem was I could never stop drinking. And I was 44 years old when I realized that there was nothing else for me to try. I realized that my mind never let me see the truth about alcohol. I was one of those alcoholics that kept saying, next time, next time, next time I drink differently. And it got to the point that I wasn't drinking for a sense of ease and comfort, because I forgot what ease and comfort felt like. See, I had lived in the world of at least. My world got very small. And as my world got small, I fit in that smallness. I saw people in my same age group making something of their lives, whether it was creating families, having careers. And I was okay with having a mattress on the floor. So that's why I say I lived in the world of at least, because I would say, well, at least I have a mattress. And I couldn't see that there was anything wrong in that. My home group is No Serenity to Brooklyn. I joined that home group since COVID. I like that home group because it's a lot of young people. And I mean, these kids are in the solution. And I feel that home group has longevity because they're young and they're on the firing line. And even though we have a beginners meeting, there's usually a panel that talks about either the traditions or the step. And then the speaker and everyone that they have to speak references our basic text, the big book. I have service commitments in that home group. We have 5 meetings a week, and I have a commitment at 3 of those meetings. I co-chair our 12 and 12 meeting on Tuesday night, and I'm the secretary at our big book meeting on Monday night, and I'm the waiting room person on our beginners meeting on Sunday. My spiritual journey has not always been a straight line. About 2 years ago, I realized at my meetings, I was going to 1 meeting a week. I had 1 person I was working with. And I know from experience that if I do not enlarge my spiritual life, I'm heading closer to a drink. And it's subtle because it has me start worrying. I started wondering, okay, what am I going to do? I had a leg injury. I got into a lot of self-pity. What am I going to do about my leg? What am I going to do about my job? And it was all this me. And thank God I have been in this program long enough to realize, oh no, I'm heading down a slippery slope. So I went to a meeting and the amazing thing happened. I knew what I shared when I started. I don't know what I shared, but I do know when I finished, I was shaking. And from that share, I was asked to speak at an anniversary, and then I spoke at 4 other meetings, and what transpired was 9 people sitting around my dining room table. And I was taking them through the big book. And I realized in that moment, okay, God, I get it. See, Bill Wilson tells us that God handles all problems, all things, spiritual principles will manage our lives. So what is there for me to do? I rely on God and work on God's behalf. There are some times in my life that I don't know what to do. When I don't know, I don't do until I hear. See, meditation is not so much stilling my mind, but it's stilling my mind so I can hear God. And sometimes I have to sit in some uncomfortability for a moment because I'm not getting any clear indication of what to do. But when I rely on God, I can still look around and say, you know what, Donna, but you're okay. It's just this one thing that you're not clear on. See, when I rely on my thinking, Lord have mercy, it'll take that one little thing that I can't figure out and it'll turn it into a problem, and it blots out any goodness I got going on in my life. So this August 5th, 2000, why is this date etched in my mind? And when I work with people, I always ask them to look back on that last day that you drank. Because see, after we go through 64 pages on step 1 in that big book, and if I can identify and say that I couldn't control how much I drank, I couldn't control staying stopped, and I'm not drinking today, I don't know about you guys, but I know for me, I did not automatically, miraculously get the power on my own to stay stopped. See, if I'm not convinced what God did on August 5th, 2000, my God is going to stay small. Because see, my ego is going to start thinking that it's got something to do with me staying stopped. But after going through the work, I realized that I can't rely too much on what my mind says because it lied to me about alcohol. It never told me I would never beat the game. It's amazing because when I had lost the power of choice, because the alcohol was choosing me. Once the alcohol was in my body, that's when I came up with an excuse as to why I picked up. Because I still had to kind of convince myself that it was my doing. But see, this disease is very powerful. And I go through step 1 often because I work with others a lot. And every time I go through step 1, I realize how powerful this disease is. And we got to do a better job of telling the newcomer, just don't drink and go to meetings, because this disease is too powerful for that. So this hot day of August 2000, trust me, I wasn't looking for a solution, but there was nothing else for me to try. See, I had been sitting in the crack den, and I'm not going to say much about drugs because this is AA, but I was sitting in the crack den. And I remember saying to someone, I said, the only thing I had not tried to stay stopped was God. I remember saying that. But I didn't know how to get to God. So I didn't do anything. Going to church seemed foreign, picking up the Bible seemed foreign. So I didn't do anything. But a wise person in AA told me that God can hold his breath for a very long time as he waits for us to want and need God enough. So on this hot day, Lord, it was so hot. I had 50 cents in my pocket, and that wasn't the first time. And when I have 50 cents in my pocket, I have 2 questions. Am I going to get a beer, or am I going to get a loose cigarette? Because see, in New York City, you can buy loosies. Earlier, I had to get home, I had to beg the token booth person to let me on the train. And I had to come up with some lie. See, lying was very easy for me because see, my perception of who I was based on what I thought you thought about me. So I lied all the time because see, I didn't want you to know that I was really very fearful and I was very insecure. See, when people looked at me, they saw something different than how I felt about me. So I had a lot of opportunities open up. And I would like gingerly walk in. And once there was something that looked like it was difficult, I hauled ass. I never had any stick-to-itiveness. And it's interesting because it says that we were drinking for a sense of ease and comfort. I was looking for the wrong thing. It wasn't ease and comfort I needed. I needed a power so that I can deal with life. Because that's what I have today. It says lack of power was our dilemma. And it's interesting because it doesn't say lack of power is our dilemma. Lack of power was our dilemma. And the only time you know what you don't have is when you finally have it. And so these alcoholics before me are telling me what they now have. And I get to see, okay, so it's more than just not drinking. See, I was in a therapeutic community before I came into AA, right? This hot day, and I felt like I looked like this, like I had my head bowed and my hands up, and I just couldn't take it anymore. I didn't know I was an alcoholic, but I knew I was tired. I was tired of going to work with no sleep. I was tired of manipulating and lying and stealing and cheating. I was tired of living in my mother's house, and I didn't even have a key. And for a long time, I didn't think there was anything wrong in that. When I stopped trying, there was enough space for grace. And a power burst upon me that I had never felt before. And I knew I never would have to drink again. And I walked past my mom, who would sit on the couch, and I told her as much. I said, I'm done. I went upstairs. I don't know. Back then we had phone books. I don't know how. No, I do know. I do know now. See, there's a lot that I didn't know then that I know now. I opened up the phone book and I knew to look for a detox. On my own, I did not know to look for a detox. That was God. And see, I'm not ashamed to say it today. Don't talk to the newcomer about God. I don't know about y'all, but I tried for a very long time. So I go to a detox and I was asked, was I willing to go to any length? And it's interesting because AA and NA speakers were in the detox, and that's what we do. We take on service commitments, but I didn't hear them. You know, the old timers used to say they used the word mocus, and I never knew what mocus meant. I guess I was mocus because I didn't hear what they said. And so I went through a therapeutic community. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know. I just followed directions. I always say I was given the gift of willingness because I never asked. I just said, okay, I'll go. And I was there for 18 months, and it wasn't a 12-step program. It was a behavior modification. And I can tell you, I don't have the power to change my behavior because I don't know the opposite of what I'm being. And that's why step 6 and 7 are so powerful, because all of a sudden I'm awake. And all of a sudden what was behavior that was just natural to me, selfish, self-centered, impatient, all of a sudden that becomes uncomfortable behavior. And God shows me how to behave. So I was about to graduate this therapeutic community, and I didn't know what I did in 18 months that was going to keep me from a drink. I did not realize that problem had already been removed because I was in there for 18 months and the thought of a drink had never occurred. That's how powerful August 5th was. I was also very scared about going home because I'm like, okay, now what do I do? See, I didn't know how to live. And I had messed my life up so bad that under normal conditions, I didn't know how to live. I really didn't know what the hell I was going to do. So they were about to close this house. And if anybody knows anything about a therapeutic community, when they close the house, you can't go anywhere except to work and to meetings. And there was so much untreated alcoholism in there. I didn't realize what untreated alcoholism was until I came into AA, but it was just people in there that drug dealers that were in there because they were beating the bid. They didn't want to go to jail, so they go to the TC, and other people that were mandated. And I wasn't mandated. And it's interesting, when I was in intake, they asked me how much I drank, and I said, "Oh, I don't drink a lot." See, it's interesting. My mind would give up the drugs, but it wouldn't give up the alcohol. It's like it was protecting it. And so I go to meetings, and I remembered I was going to a meeting on 96th Street and Broadway called First Things First. And it's a very small room, and it's like a cocoon, and they have the slogans, and they're in nice frames. I mean, it exudes warmth and exudes love. And I just cried. I knew there was something magical about where I was at. And they allowed me to cry. And so I started hearing the shares. And I heard a lot of people complaining, using AA as therapy. And some of the stories were funny. But I don't know how long I would have lasted if all I heard was people talking about their problems, because I had my own. And thank God I heard a recovered alcoholic. See, this is why that circle and that triangle, we got to be in the center and going around constantly. We always have to go to the fellowship and carry the message. It says, and also too, I realized that, early on, that I couldn't just hang out in solution-based meetings. I had to go, they talk about the sorted places in the big book. Well, some of those sorted places are AA meetings where they're just telling people, just don't drink and go to meetings. That's where we need to be, on the firing line. And it was very hard in the beginning, because I would go to meetings and I would share about what experiences I was having in the program of AA, and a lot of the elders would share behind me and discredit me, until somebody said, "Donna, they gave the carpenter a hard time when he was speaking. So what do you think they're going to do for those of us that are speaking and trying to lead people to God?" Because I believe that's all we do here, is we lead people to the God of their understanding. See, I know what my role is in all of this. I rely on God as I read the big book, and I rely on God to share through me, so that that person can start their journey to their creator. I don't tell people what to do as a sponsor, because this is a program of suggestions. So I think on the sponsee level, it's not my job to tell people what to do, because I don't know what experience God wants them to have. I'll suggest, but I don't start managing people's lives, because see, my ego loves nothing better than to think it's a great big such a much and start telling people what to do. So I'm hearing this woman share, and I was like, oh my God, this woman had what I didn't have yet. And I realized that that's what I wanted. I wanted to sound, because it wasn't what she was saying, it's how she looked. She had this comfortability about her. And I always say that the biggest gift I got in AA was the ability to be. And the word be has only 2 letters of the alphabet, but it took a journey to get here. I'm also very grateful that this woman came up to me and she asked me, "Don, are you willing to go to any length?" So this is the second time I'm being asked this in this journey. And I told her yes. And so I was directed, while I was still in this therapeutic community, I was directed to a couple that lived in Harlem. And they were taking people through the big book. They had met Joe Hawk at a conference in Canada. And they were taking addicts and alcoholics through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I'm very grateful I was in the therapeutic community, because I didn't have the opportunity to start relying on human power. I couldn't have like a conventional sponsor that I had to call them every day, because I didn't have those kind of phone privileges. It was probably a good thing for me, because that book opened up, cracking open that book cracked up something in me, because I finally was able to understand what was wrong with me. I used to think I was just irresponsible. And then I found out about the physical craving and the mental obsession. And then it started to make sense because I realized that the physical craving and the mental obsession interfered with any success I wanted in life. I had great intentions. My human resources failed me every time. I would set goals, I put my best foot forward, couldn't get past where I was at. And so step one came alive to me. It was very, step two, at this point, my willingness to believe in God, I didn't have a problem with that because I know that God had orchestrated this journey in recovery because I would not have met Loretta and Sydney on my own. And in my first year, I go to Fellowship of the Spirit and I hear Mark Houston, and I think it was Dave F. And I remember I sat in that front row and I cried because I knew that God had put me someplace special. I just knew it. I would be around the recovered alcoholics and I wouldn't even speak. I'd be in the car with Rashid and Loretta and Sydney. I wouldn't speak because I used to think I had my act together. When I was around them, I said, oh my God, who these people, I just couldn't believe how they were showing up and their behavior. And then I started meeting other people that were on this path, and we started going to meetings. And you would think in New York City, there'd be so many big book meetings. We had to find them. We would go to the Bronx, we'd go to Staten Island, we'd go to Jersey. And I started creating the fellowship that I craved. Very grateful I was able to create my tribe. And so when I left the therapeutic community, I got a job. And it's interesting because prior to my first job in recovery, my jobs had been surrounding alcohol. I was like a cocktail waitress at after hours. I used to love after hours, by the way. I loved being in places where the rest of the world had no idea we were hanging out and tipping out of there at 9 a.m. and going to the after hours. I always say that my alcoholism described itself as a big old party to me until it stopped being fun. So while I'm in this therapeutic community, I get my first job. And it's amazing because I'm on 9th step amends when I get my job. And God saw fit to get me a job working as the executive assistant to a CEO. And those were the jobs I held in recovery. And God did my jobs for me. But see, now I can show up. I can be a worker amongst worker. And my first paychecks, those checks were not my money because I owed the universe. And so I was very grateful for those paychecks because I was able to pay off all my financial amends. So my willingness to believe in step two, it was not hard for me to be willing to believe. And I also realized that my conception of God was much bigger than I thought because I did look at those spiritual terms and I did ask myself in prayer, in a prayerful manner, God, what do you mean to me as? And I went through all those spiritual terms and I realized, wow, my conception of God is big. And it needed to be because I was going to have to give all of me over to God in step three, my thinking and my actions. And it's interesting, I never used the word will before AA. I never looked at, that word will never was part of my vocabulary. Because we do this work asking God to show us truth, because I realize that I cannot rely on my mind. My mind lied to me about alcohol. My mind lies to me about me. It still wants to tell me I'm not good enough. It still wants to tell me that things are too difficult. It still wants to tell me 5 things I need to do at one time just so I can feel like a failure before I start. And so I knew not to believe my mind when it wants to tell me I need to be skeptical about God. The same mind that lied to me about that might be lying to me about why I need to be skeptical about God. I wanted to say that again. My belief started turning into faith when I asked God to please reveal to me who I'm resentful towards. And I put pen to paper, and the pen flew across that paper. And I asked Loretta, I said, well, how do I know I'm done? She says, when the pen stops writing and you pray. And thank God. Well, what was on paper, I didn't think some of that stuff was coming from my thinking mind, like kindergarten. I'm 44 years old and kindergarten comes up. So it was those kinds of things that I started to be willing to believe that God was showing me some things that was not coming from here. This last time through, I really was able to understand the whole resentments, that it's really not the resentment that's the problem, it's the fear. And because I can't sit in fear, because it's too painful to sit in fear, I create some delusion, some lie I tell myself. Because I'm not going to God for the solution or the answer. So I'm coming up with the solution in my mind, and it's some bullshit lie. Excuse me, I don't usually curse. And so my thinking is hinged on this lie, and then my actions are on this lie, and then I'm assigning myself a role, and I'm afraid that this role I assign myself, I really can't live up to it, and I got a role I assign you, and I'm really afraid that you might not live up to it. And so now I'm resentful because nothing is turning out the way I want it to be. And they say that the resentment that God they have to be mastered, but how? And it's interesting because they said the same thing about alcohol, that alcohol is our master. They said we had to escape alcohol, and it says we have to escape resentments as well. Well, if I realize, that it's not really resentment, it's fear that's driving all of this, that has to be handled by God. I cannot make myself unfearful. And it's interesting because I get to see that once God removes the fear, I'm placed in a position of neutrality, just like I am with alcohol. So I'm in this place of neutrality, and I don't react the same way I used to react when people are being who they're being. Case in point, my mom, her voice used to make me cringe. Oh, God, I would cringe in fear. My mom's voice is still the same, but I don't react. And a lot of it was because God enabled me to see her from a different perspective. I loved that fourth step to me was starting of the forgiveness process. I started to forgive people. I started to realize what it was like to be around me. I made such demands on people that they couldn't live up to. And I started to see that I did the best that I could without God. See, God, the God that creates me, recreates me, but I got to see what I created in the middle. And I just get to see it. Can't do anything about it, but I get to see it. And I start saying, I'm not this great big such and much that I thought I was. And so now what do I do with all this, the truth and the lie that I get to see? So now I need to share this with another person. And the thing is, that's so humbling because all my life, who I was contingent on what I thought you thought about me. And now you get to see my hiney, right? I did fit steps with men twice. Very humbling, very powerful, very powerful. I was rendered speechless when I did my fifth step with Rashid. I was able to see what I became without God, and I realized what God's intention for me is when he said, well, Donna, what are some good things about you? And I looked at that list, and I looked at what I had become without God, and I realized, wow, this is what God intended for me. And my head dropped to the table, and I wept. When we were done in my fifth step, Rashid said one of the most powerful things to me that have been said to me in this on this journey. When he let me out the car, he says, "Now go join the human race." Another fifth step I experienced, I felt the warmth of God, and I didn't want to leave this place I was in. See, I'm convinced that we need to tell it all. And it's interesting because Rashid had said, "Donna, was that everything?" And it was something I didn't want to say because I was ashamed of. But this voice said, freedom is on the other side when you share it. And it's like I wrestled from my ego. I don't know, for those of you that have kids, imagine your kid holding onto your leg, telling you, don't leave, don't leave, don't leave. I felt that my ego was telling me, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it. And I kind of did like that. And I shared it. Wow. See, to me, this is all about crushing my ego wherever I can and crushing it into little pieces so it's hard to rebuild. Something magical happens that we do enter the world of the spirit. At this point, see, I realize I can't serve two masters. I can't serve the God of reason and the God of spirit. You know, Bill Wilson calls the ego the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow we shivered. Oh, no wonder I don't look at the world through love, understanding, and compassion. That's not how my ego is wired. Wow, that's such a powerful way to describe my ego. And so this last time, and I thank Tyler because I did my 7-step and I was on the floor and I'm looking up for those of you that are looking. I'm looking at a doorway right now because that's what I did. I walked through a doorway when I did my 7-step, and I love it because in 8 and 9 we get to see the miracle of step 7. Because I asked God to take all of me, good and bad. And I love in the big book, it says, when ready, we say something like this. And what are we ready to do? We're ready to get out of God's way. Because at this point, if I'm giving him all of me, he's now the leadership of my life. He loves me that much. It's like, look, I got you. I just want you to stick close to me. And I want you to be on the firing line, being the spearhead. That's another wonderful line. Intelligent agents, spearheads of God's ever advancing creation. Get on the fire line, and I want you to start bringing some hope to people, letting people see that there are some goodness in the world. That's what I want from you, Donna. I get to see how I've been transferred. See, the transformation happened in and through me, in spite of me, because trust me, when I get to step 9, and I'm being sincere and I'm being understanding and I'm being frank and calm and asking people, looking them in the eye and asking them, how did what I did, how did it make you feel? And is there anything else you need to tell me? Who is this Donna? So I get to see the transformation. I get to see the miracle of step 7 and 9. And I get to see God at work, putting people in my path that I can't find. And my ego's getting crushed when there's people that don't want to see me. My ego gets crushed when people tell me how what I did made them feel. And I get to see God work in their lives in this amends. Powerful stuff. And I keep getting freer and freer and freer. So now I want to spend time with God. And trust me, my spiritual journey has not been a straight line, because 7 years in, it's interesting because God says, I always tell people I work with to circle and underline every time you see the word new in the big book. New life, new foundation, new reaction. So why is it so many of us want to hold on to the same old okey doke? I see somebody like, I just love okie doke, right? So what did I do? I held on to the same okie doke in a relationship. I couldn't see that this person couldn't be who I wanted them to be. I got real sick. Oh, Lord have mercy. I was obsessing, manipulating, controlling. I knew what to do, though. I called up a recovered alcoholic and I said, I need an Al-Anon, a big book, a black belt and a big book. I don't know where I got that term from, but he sent me an Al-Anon who wasn't an alcoholic. And I went to this book and I started to see what it was like living with me. All of a sudden, it wasn't about him. And I started to see how I caused people harm. I never allowed people to have their limitations. And especially what it must have felt like me telling some guy that you're not enough and him realizing he's doing the best that he can and his woman wants him to do more. I couldn't see how hurtful that might have been. And just like how the obsession to drink was lifted, the obsession over this man was lifted. Oh, Lord have mercy. I knew I didn't do that on my own. I was able to see that this person didn't have the capacity to be who I wanted him to be. And I felt that in my heart. You know, God enters our hearts, not our minds. You know, they say that the main problem of the alcoholic centers in their mind, but that's not where the problem originates. Problem originates deep down within. I didn't know that. I am very grateful. I'm very grateful that I can thank God today, and I'm very grateful that I can ask God for guidance today. I had an experience that, you know, I'm entering, and I just love the fact that, you know, I feel like I'm saging, not aging, and you know, I'm taking on new and exciting ventures. I'm venturing into the NFT world, which is a whole nother, Lord have mercy. You know, I'm dropping an image over this in the next couple of days, and you know, it's like, oh my God, or Ethereum and cryptocurrency. Well, anyway. And so I was getting very frustrated because this is another learning curve. And usually when things get frustrated, I'm like, you know what, I can't do this. It's too difficult. And I go try something new. That was my way of living my life. My boyfriend had called me and he was trying to calm me down because I was having some problem getting gas in my wallet. And I said to him, which was so amazing, I said, you know what, I need to go get still because I do not like the direction my attitude is going. My nephew was in my house with me. He says, Auntie, I never heard anybody say that, but I get it. And I knew it. And I said, you know what, I need to go get still. Now, the amazing thing is that I got still. And what came to me was I needed to check on these 5 women that I hadn't heard from that are in the process of writing their amends cards. That wouldn't have been a thought if I had been relying on self. And that's what I did. I started texting the women, hey, you know, hadn't heard from you, where you are. I also know that when my mind tells me 5 things to do, just get still, Donna. Just get still until you're led. See, I was so driven. First thought that came, I did it. I love being led. You know, meditation to me is not just listening. It's not just being still. It's being still to listen. It's amazing. Before I share in any meeting, I just get quiet. So there's no fear because I know that I work on behalf of God today. God knows who needs to hear what I'm sharing. So I know where I begin, and I don't know where my shares take me, and I'm okay with that. Working with others, boy, God has always sent me his children to work with. I remember I think I was in 4th Step Amends, and I was like, Loretta, what am I going to do? These people want me to take them through the work. She says, as long as you're a page ahead, you can take them through because you know more than they do. So I'm in New York City and I'm sitting in coffee shops. I was taking this one guy through the big book sitting in McDonald's. And there was this one coffee shop, that back table was always available for us. So I've always been on the firing line. That's what we do. I'm very grateful for Zoom because I get to hear some powerful speakers. I see my girl Brenda J on here, and I just love her. I would have never met her. I would have never been connected to her God. And I get to work with people. I'm working with some people some young people, and I get to see them working with people. It's a beautiful thing to witness. Some of my more extra sponsees call me their grand sponsor mama. I'm okay with that. And I get to see their lives transform. I get to see them having their first experience with God. See, I can't have another first experience with God, but I get to see other people's. I worked with a woman who was very intelligent. And when she realized, oh my God, Donna, I realized I have nothing to do with keeping myself sober. And I just had to sit there while she had that experience. It's also very powerful when we listen to footsteps. Isn't it amazing how God doesn't let us remember what we just heard? You know, he loves us so much that he just wants us to step in. And I always say, God, enable me to hear what I need to hear and say what you need me to say. He doesn't take the pain from someone and put it on our hearts. I never remember. This is such a powerful, powerful program. How much, what, Phil, am I over exactly at 9 or?
You could go over if you like.
All right. Well, this is when I start sharing stories. I never know what to do, like when the gas starts going out and where do I go? I had, I don't know where to go. Phil, I'm gonna, and I'm like, there's nothing coming, guys. So I want to thank you all for allowing me to share tonight. Yeah, thank you.